Guys,
Said 4 seconds.
girls,
That clock's wrong.
yeah.
You're on.
Rick, you're on.
Call the meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Everybody make sure their cell phones turned off. Okay, hey, do we have a roll call?
Okay. Noordam,
Here.
Gould,
Here.
Hale,
Present.
Cornwell, Zibell-Wolfe, Duczek. Here. Gourley.
Here.
Okay, let's see, we're gonna roll call, any amendments to the agenda, Dave?
There are
Anybody?
none. We have none.
Okay. Ceremonies, appointments, announcements, we have none.
We have none.
Declarations of conflict. Anybody have a conflict tonight on any of the agenda? Okay. Consent calendar, action times. We have something there under meeting minutes of the 24th of July.
I would move to approve the summer barbecue meeting minutes from July 24th,
Good
2018
idea.
as presented.
Yeah, I think I missed that.
No, you were there.
There it is. Okay. Have a motion?
Motion, yes.
I'll second that.
All in favor? All right, you got to do a roll call, Haley. I'm sorry.
No problem. Noordam
All right.
and Gould
Abstain.
and Hale
Aye.
and Duczek.
Aye.
And Gourley.
Aye.
All right.
Okay, moving on. We don't have any citizen issues tonight, I can see, and no unfinished old business. New business, under new business, Dave, I see we have a planning discussion on 3 things, and followed by a departmental trend.
Yes. We thought it would be timely to bring forward to you, I guess as just information, some of the different planning issues or programs that are coming forward to you folks, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly. First one is the Black Bay Master Plan, and I'm going to let Brian speak on that since he's been our project lead for that.
How big is Black Bay total? You remember? I don't remember.
I would have to, here we go, just plus or minus 62 acres.
I was going to say 63, but we're there. We took off half an acre and we added 5 acres.
And then we had the one property encroachment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was 58, so,
Okay.
yeah, prior to the exchange. And then there's a utility parcel that was exchanged recently as well. It sits up on the south side of Ford Rock. That acquisition's happened in the last 2 years, and mostly that was for utility infrastructure that's sitting on the backside of that old reservoir up there. So Black Bay, we've been working over the past several months to get to the point where we're going to contract with a consultant for a new master plan or a new vision plan for that space. Black Bay Park underwent its last planning effort back in the early 90s, and in a lot of ways that initial effort kind of precipitated this commission. And it was an early planning effort, heavily utilized University of Idaho students, but there's some background and some historic data and that was captured in that effort of what the community needs were when we were a town of about 7,000 people. But as we are starting to see demographics change and the needs of our community begin to shift, we had a number of items that we're looking at adding to that facility and being able to integrate the improvements that were already made in that upper Black Bay area with the basketball court and the tennis court and that parking improvement, being able to integrate that with the rest of the space and have it be an asset to the community that we can all be proud of, and we can do sequentially in a way that makes sense, that we can scale it up over time is what we were looking for. So in August, we approached council with a request for us to publish a request for statement of public qualifications for consultants. So that opens up for a period of time. Consultants put together a proposal, send that back to staff. Staff reviewed those and ranked those individual consultants. And we approached the most highly qualified firm based on that assessment. And we're in the negotiation phase of that right now. If we're able to reach an agreement, which we're hopeful we have at this point, that'll be presented to council in the first meeting in November, and we'll be off to the races with that plan, potentially getting our first project team meeting in before the first of the year. And then the whole planning effort, we're looking at a 7 to 8 month planning effort to have a vision plan. So we're looking at somewhere May, June, having something that will be before Parks and Rec Commission and City Council. We've had to really streamline this plan. The most highly qualified firm as selected is out of Denver, and so there'll be flights coming in and out, and we'll have some online meetings and that sort of thing to be able to accommodate that that dynamic of trying to consolidate and use those dollars wisely for the travel expenses. That'll result in the need of some online meetings for the project team and the steering committee, as well as on-site meetings when we're actually getting the public involved and trying to get a plan of what they're looking for in this space. So really what we're looking for from our Parks Commission is a level of involvement. We're looking for up to 2 Parks Commission members that would sit on that steering committee to help guide where this park space is going and help to engage the public so that we can have a good plan that really is vetted within our community and reflects the character of our city. Very important space. You know, it's one of those naturalized spaces that's right in the heart of what will become downtown Post Falls as our community continues to grow. And, you know, every bit as critical as what we're doing with the community forest and Falls Park and Camille, and all of those spaces on the river are really going to shape and continue to shape what people identify as Post Falls. The old green water tower used to be orange and black. It was one of those points of reference that we'd always write our directions to home or write directions to school when we're in elementary school, and it still has that potential going forward. So with that, I'd stand for questions on the process or what we're looking for.
It's been a few years since we did a survey, but we're getting the feedback from the citizens online. Is that, you say what, you started off by saying, you know, what the citizens want.
Right.
Where are we picking that up? From the old survey or from online?
So kind of the process that got us to the point where we're at now, that kind of folded out of that master plan.
Okay.
Within the master plan, it identified.
Old master plan, okay. That's updated yearly.
No, well, we just did an update a couple of years ago to extend our life of that old master plan, because we had so many of these projects that were in motion. Generally, every 5 to 7 years is when we look at that Parks and Rec master plan. That's one of the topics that Dave will be talking about here shortly. On Black Bay specifically, in our last master plan, just over 5 years ago, it identified lack of maintenance, erosion issues on the shoreline, and a lot of those maintenance level items are related to how remote the area feels, and some of those needs that we have there.
We had some issues with vandalism, throwing stuff down over the hillside, and did we cure that, or by chain thing up, or
but there's always
garbage cans aren't being over the hill now?
Not so much. Yeah, we've steered a lot of that, but
we still fight that
from time to time. Yeah, we've pretty much locked down our porta potty down there so that it's really hard to move at this point. But yeah.
Thank you.
So as far as commission members that are willing to step forward for that plan, that'll be something that you get with Dave or myself, so we can start to build that team. And then also community members that may have a stake in that facility, that have an interest in that facility that you'd like to see be involved. Make sure we're getting the word out to those folks so they can be involved in the public meetings as they move forward.
So I guess if there's anybody who really wants to do it, they can speak up now, or like Brian said, they could let myself know. If we have more than two, what we'll do is just put names in a hat and draw it that way. We're going to have other master plans coming up that we will be wanting, once again, two commission members. So we don't want to see everybody serving, the same person on all of it. We want to see that different viewpoint. And the reason why we do, too, is that we don't want to have to go into any kind of public notification on it. We want to make sure that there's a representation, but then when it comes back to the whole group, it's not, majority saying something on it. We want to make sure that then the whole group can consider it in its merit, so. Okay?
Thank you.
Second part of that is impact fees. This is one that is going to be affecting you folks indirectly. You've actually done a lot of the heavy lifting on it. When we look at our minimum standards that you went in and updated last year, when we look at our level of service, going back in and reconfirming that it's the 16 acres, the 6 active, 10 passive, and then even when we looked at the park definition or the levels, the 1, 2, and 3, the third being that open, or being the conservation areas. So all of those are going to the consultant. It's Tischler Bice, the city selected. We met with them last week, and we're now in the process of gathering up all the information. And then they will come back in. They're going to look at the different methodologies, but that is for parks, it is for streets, and it is for public safety. Those are the 3 areas that are handled by that. So we'll keep you appraised as it goes on. You'll have a chance to attend the public meeting, but it's planning and zoning that is the impact fee review committee. So that's going forward. And I'm going to go ahead and take a step back. When we talk about the planning process, there's going to be a lot of planning going on in the next few years. We highlighted these 3, but in recognizing it, one of the requests that went into City Council was for a park planner. And we just recognized that the volume of planning we have to do, the amount of permitting, the need for more consultants, all that is just increasing. So over the next few months, we hope to be able to hire a park planner who is a licensed landscape architect. If we're unable to find, a licensed landscape architect, we'd be looking at an architect or an engineer, but we really need that, one of those 3 licensed professionals. We just have a lot of things going on, and they're coming up more.
How does that affect your current budget or going forward?
It was approved in the city's budget, so the monies are available for that. So, it's a tough one when you look at, we need more people for, like, say, the mowing crew, or we need more people for the maintenance side of it, but we are just getting really clogged down on all these park plans that are coming up, and the need for little ones, and the staff time that's spent going between some of our contractors back and forth, and we were seeing a lot of excess money being spent trying to refine that and keep ourselves on task. So we feel that this will get us moving forward. It will allow some of my time and Brian's time, and even our supervisor's time spent working more with staff. We have a lot of young staff, so that ability to make sure that they're trained properly and assisting in there. So it was just, I think it will help us on overall our functions. But besides this, we have the sports complex coming up. That's going to be a major project. Of course, we bought the Cecil House, so that's going to need to be planned out there. You've got the Montrose Parks that'll be coming online. There we work with the developer, but even when we're using their people, there's a lot of interaction in it. It's, you don't just, sit back and let it go. There's the Foxtail. And then, of course, once wastewater has all their planning done and engineering on that, land application, then we're going to be looking at that community forest plan. So the next 5-7 years, we're going to be very, very busy. And there's going to be a lot of input and a lot of planning sides of it, so that's where that's critical.
I have one more question, then I digress a minute, is back to Black Bay. I noticed a big event at the senior center the other day. Do we have a parking problem with that? Is there ever an issue with overflow parking in Black?
Not
You got
at
pretty
this-
good sized parking.
Yeah, not at this point. We are looking ultimately to extend that parking lot in front of the,
We bought some of that parking lot, didn't we, or it comes with the building?
it comes with the building, that part, but even with that, there will be need for overflow into Black Bay Park, and we're looking at going out in front of 3rd Street where our park, vehicles park right now, the staff, and extending that Third Street parking lot around in a dog leg and creating more parking there.
And
So,
the 62 acres that are included in the scope includes the park maintenance facility, so we can buffer that use adjoining and maybe even look at what the long-range plan is for that facility as we grow.
Been addressed then, or you're addressing it?
Yeah, it should help the parking need in that little neighborhood.
Thank you much.
so the final part on the planning side of it is and it's probably the largest one for us this year, will be the park master plan, the comprehensive plan. And we have not gone out for an RFQ on it yet. We have talked to Green Play about 6 months ago to try and get a gauge on how busy they were, what kind of the market was looking at. We will go out for a full RFQ on it. It's time to be updated.
Right.
And in that sense, I guess that's one of the things I wanted to bring forward to you folks. If you look at the last plan, it's going to include the public meetings, it's going to include the focus groups, the stakeholder meetings. We would hope to do a statistically valid survey again, and that's what you were asking about on the survey side of it. Those are pretty expensive. They run about $20,000 for that component, just that survey, and that's usually a subcontractor that's brought out that specializes in it. So you have all those. We'll look at the trends and stuff. Usually there's a asset inventory where they'll go and look at what we have. Once again, it comes into our park grid, but the last one, they actually went out and they graded each site. And I guess that's one question, if you feel that part's needed to have not only an inventory of what it is, but then having an outside group rank how that is, whether it's in good condition, poor condition, needs improvements, all of those. It's sometimes nice to have an independent eye look at it. On the same note, that's one more cost that we do.
Yeah, they're not driving by it every day, so they get a different view.
They get a different view. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good, but those are one of the things that we did have in that last one.
Good.
Levels of service analysis, just looking at the programs that we run, the number, how they're offered, the types of parks that we're running, are there deficiencies in there? We went fairly light on the benchmarking last time. I think that's one that this time we'd like to see a little bit more benchmarking, some internal benchmarking, but also looking at a regional, national level. And I think with the Park Matrix program that's out there within our PA, and we've been a part of that, it allows us a little bit better access for that.
Yeah.
So I don't think that would be a real expensive part of it, but coming through with that. And what that means is when we bring it forward, they're going to come in here with the meetings and stuff, and they'll ask you where you want to be marked off of or set as that benchmark, and there'll be a staff recommendation, then there'll be a commission recommendation, and we'll kind of go from there. One of the things that I thought the last one did fairly poorly was looking at the revenue streams and that revenue generation. I would like to see that one a little bit more in depth. I think it's becoming tougher to go out and just get a grant here or there. The grants are becoming smaller. They're a lot more labor intensive. But to look at some of the private foundations, to look at a broader base. So I would like to see that happen. And of course, we always have to have the recommendations. We want to make sure that they are achievable and not just that we're paying for a blanket amount of recommendations, but ones that fit within what our needs are and they fit within the city's strategic plan and city's comprehensive plan.
Challenging, but achievable.
Yeah. And we've done a pretty good job, but there were some that were in there that we did not have the resources, nor was the city ready to do it. When you look at some of the wayfinding stuff for the downtown area, we need to develop that downtown area first. Mm-hmm. So those have kind of been pushed back. Some of the new areas that I'd like you to consider, and we'll discuss this more at our next workshop, which is in a month. But areas that could be concentrated on could be open space, how we want to define that and look at it. A recreation center, a community center. Trails and connectivity, as you look at the 41 corridor being improved, as you look at some of the freeway stuff, if Pleasant View Bridge goes in, are those things that we want to make sure we have that connectivity going to those? Obviously, the river open space is becoming less and less in those deals, but how is that connectivity in there? And of course, with the community forest, how does it all connect? Other areas to consider would be aging infrastructure. Not a lot of places are planning in that sense. A lot of people are saying we have issues and we can't meet the needs. I want to get ahead of that curve. I know at the last conference, in some of the director meetings, that was some of the stuff I talked to in the networking on. And everybody's saying, well, yeah, it's a problem, but I don't see a lot of planning. I'd kind of like to get ahead of that curve. Staffing levels, no, that's one everybody talked about across the board. But it might be nice to have that incorporated into this plan. Accreditation, there's no one that is accredited in Idaho. It's a long process, it's a hard process, and when you don't have the staff numbers to be able to devote to it, it may be that one of those options is putting it into a plan like this or hiring another consultant. But that's a thing to consider. And then marketing. A lot of agencies are having marketing divisions within it. They're finding that that expertise and being able to run the social media side and the print side and getting the biggest bang for the buck, that it's taking a little bit more specialization. We do have help right now from our information department who puts on these, but once again, they're one division within the city and they're servicing all levels, and sometimes we get a little demanding on that. When I say a little demanding, we just have so many programs. So those are things I need to think of. If there's other areas, if you'll just send them to myself or Haley, and we'll jot those down, and then at our next workshop, we'll discuss it in detail, what we have to do. With the understanding that once we get a company selected, you start negotiating with them that this is what we need, and then you look at, well, we'd like to add this and this. Every one of those things has a cost, and some of it we can't afford. And then some of it may say that this isn't the appropriate venue, but we would like to look at the possibility of hiring a different company to do some of that, or to devote staff time to really focus on something.
Okay, thank you.
So that's
Before
one of
we
the.
move on
Right,
from,
that-
excuse me, go ahead.
I got one question back on Black Bay, on there being new with the consultant. I mean, obviously we have staffing constraints, but what's the expectation of the consultant? What do they really bring to the table in the process that's going to be interacting with the group?
The consultant's going to bring that ability to draw out the conversation and, stage the meetings, have the audio-visual elements that are going to help to communicate different plan options and that sort of thing. And then the professional consulting the professional design experience, the ability to actually start to draft landscape architecture level drawings. Once again, kind of 25% design stage. This curb's going to be at this elevation at this location. It's going to be general higher visions. So like a 20,000 foot view of the park. So the master plans are 50,000 foot view, and this is zooming in just over Black Bay and what it'll become.
Thank you.
From there,
Any comments or questions from any commissioners?
I'd like to add to that. From there, you would add, once you have that plan, then you start doing your construction plans. But this particular firm was selected because they have demonstrated just a great interface between a natural setting and an urban setting and how to combine those two, which is what we're talking about with Black Bay. It's got a lot of jumbled pieces to it, and it's getting that connectivity to make it an actual regional showpiece.
The other, along those same lines of interacting with the natural piece and the developed piece, they have a lot of creative ideas of how to integrate people with water. And that's one of the big demands that we have at Black Bay, both in terms of pedestrians trying to interact with the water along those shorelines, and then the impacts of boats on the Spokane River and how those uses are impacting those shorelines. We're losing inches to feet of shore every year on that park, and we need to be proactive in looking for solutions that can integrate that space, protect the resource, and allow people to interact with the water, because that's what they're going to be. That's where they're going to be. If you go to Tubbs Hill and Coeur d'Alene, things have eroded back to solid rock. We have some solid rock at Black Bay, but we're going to lose a lot of park before we get there. And that's what we're trying to, in some of these areas, trying to make sure we are ahead of the game on.
Preventative, okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Brian. Well, we'll move on then to impact fees, Dave.
Actually, that was the one that I covered second, so
So you did.
yeah, so that was running through everything with...
I apologize, okay.
No, I've kind of jumbled things together, so at this point, I've covered everything on the planning discussion. If there's any questions, I'll those.
I used to fight Dave over impact fees, and now the longer I've been on the board for, 10 years, we need the impact fees. When I was building houses, it was like, what do you mean you're going to charge me this many dollars? The new park on the point over here, new park, but where we divided the land on the end of Harry Green's or the property on the point, isn't there going to be an amphitheater or something there?
We're working on that.
Does that have a name?
It's the landings. So
we're going to call it the landing?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's an urban...
that's the only question I have.
The urban plaza.
I should have waited new business, I apologize.
That's okay.
For comments. Okay. We'll go then on to what? Department trends?
Yes.
Departmental trends, Dave.
The reason why we wanted to bring this forward to you folks is as we move forward, I think with the comprehensive plan and even with some of our operational activities over the next few years, the trends that we've identified as staff are going to play a larger role. Now, some of these ones you're going to go, well, of course, and then some of them are some of the things we're seeing nationally, and some of them are more of it's post-falls. The staffing, that's nationwide. An interesting fact with the Parks and Recreation, with the recession, Parks and Recreation nationally took the biggest hit of government agencies in that. And the figure was that over 4,000 positions were eliminated, and some of them say a larger amount, but with the figure of 4,000 that they were tracking of the big city, 4,000 positions were eliminated, and that's in the top 50 departments. So kind of gives you an idea that that's just a small segment of the population, but that's what NRPA and Trust for Public Lands was tracking. Of that, it was less than 500 positions were ever brought back full-time. Now, they did bring back about 4,000 positions, but The rest of them were all part-time seasonal positions. So there's a huge shift in the industry of going to even more part-time and seasonal positions. The challenge is, how do you manage that workforce? How do you get the skilled labor that you need to do it? And having a balance in there. We were very lucky in that sense. We didn't take those cuts. We just didn't grow, even though our system was growing. So we're thankful for that. But the staffing issues, it's the level of staffing with the growth. And this is not just us. This is throughout the city. You know, it's a challenge that we're all facing. Technology allows us to change some of that and adjust to some of that, but we're still using more seasonal help, but we're not able to fill all of the positions. And that will remain. We don't see that changing too much, and getting that skill set and getting the people trained with what they need. So it becomes more of a challenge. Some places will look at contracting it out, but once again, you can't just contract it out and walk away. It takes the supervision and the checking up and having contracts that are good enough that you can get that responsiveness to the public. So those will remain an issue. We talked about contracting out. Well, also contractor availability, whether it's for that type of, say, for a maintenance function or for a programming function, but also for the construction. We've used a lot of contractors this year, as you'll see in some of our slides coming up. If you don't have a really good relationship with those contractors, it's hard to get them in. And even with some of the stuff we're seeing with some of the planning, it's taking longer and longer to get our plans back and our drawings and our everything to be stamped. So processes are taking longer. Increased costs across the board. The costs that it takes for a playground now have just skyrocketed, but it's irrigation, it's everything. And that's just a fact of life. As we see more products that are being imported, and you add the tariffs, the costs are going up. We know with the cemetery, the markers are going up. If we look at more niches, that granite, most of that's being imported. And then some of the local areas aren't able to get it. So things will take longer, things will go up. Hand in hand with it, we're seeing a greater level of planning needed, more professional contracts and in-depth plans. We have more regulations that we have to follow. And we just need to ensure that we're maximizing the public's dollar and our efficiencies, so things will take a little bit longer to do. Other things that we're seeing, analytics and data will play a greater role, and that's not just in the parks, but in our programming, from the cemetery to the urban forestry. As we are able to access more data, then we'll be more efficient, but sometimes you can get too much, and it's kind of sifting through all of that. But you know, even in your marketing side of it, it's amazing what you can learn, and you can look at your traffic flows. I know at the national conference, one of the places I stopped at, they have analytics with the video cameras, so you can put them into, say, your parks as you have an entry, or use it for a community center, and it can tell you that traffic flow and how long the people are staying. Now, it only covers about a 300 square foot area, but they have ways to track it, but it updates itself every second. Now, that takes a very powerful computer and a lot of stuff there, but the things they're able to tell on traffic flow, you can utilize the same thing on parking and stuff, so those things will continue to evolve. Even our dash system is becoming more and more sophisticated. It gives us a lot of information on how people find it, how quickly they can move in and out, and so it just will play a bigger role. Community and customer demands, we are seeing a real increase in that. People are wanting the information a lot quicker. They're wanting responses quicker. We have a rule to get back to everybody within 24 hours. And most people are pretty good with that, but there's some that it's got to be a lot quicker than that. just where the bar is, what they expect in their facilities, what they expect in their programs, in the special events. So that will continue to evolve. As people come from different areas, they have different experiences and different expectations. So we're just seeing some of that changing. Our usage of our facilities and services is definitely going up. That makes sense with population increasing. Marketing of the facilities and events, we're seeing people wanting the information a little bit quicker. There's more ways they want it. People are a little bit more engaged, so we'll continue to work with that. They want quick and easy access, or whether it's for a program, whether it's to register, whether it's for just general information. So, make sure that you can get it on your phone, make sure that it's clear and concise, that it's not confusing, that it's accurate. The flip side of that is, and wanting that instant information, the flip side is they want that customer contact. They want that personal touch. They want the human interaction. So it's balancing between the two. And I think that for our department, and I say our department, but for Parks and Recreation, that's critical. That's one of those things about that connectivity to a community. It's one of the challenges I think as a society we're facing as more people become isolated. We have to be the agency that gets people away from their phone, that they can actually talk to a person, interact with a person. It's a critical role. We're seeing a changing pattern in our rentals and that expectation. We're seeing when I say rentals, that's the picnic shelters, that's our trailhead event center. That usage is going up, but also that expectation for full service. They look at, especially with the trailhead, that they want us setting up, they want us cleaning up. It's the self-serve side of it is going away, and that expectation for us to be a full service. And that goes back to that staffing and having that, so we have to figure that out. Programming for parks, it's not enough just to build a great park, but you got to get public interaction into it. You have to fill the space. So as we look at Tullamore and having the amphitheater, as we look at the urban plaza at the landings and that amphitheater, those have to be programmed, they have to be used. More large-scale events. And it doesn't mean it has to be a long weekend event, and it doesn't mean that we have to be the ones doing it, but once again, programming for parks, filling up that space, that expectation that there are community activities, areas to gather, that connectivity to the human touch, the interaction. There's that expectation. And the final thing is that aging infrastructure and forecasting out before it becomes a critical failure. Last several years, I know, talking to a lot of directors around the nation, how many of them have absolutely no plan on how they're going to fix those parks other than go out for a large bond. Well, in Idaho, that's really difficult. We have to get ahead of that curve and have some plans in place. Maybe that's that corporate trust that I've talked about, creating that ability to have something that would take care of it, just like we do with perpetual care on a cemetery. So those are some of the trends that we see. I don't know if there's other trends that you guys have noticed or feel that we should be looking at, but I'm open to any thoughts or comments.
You answered it pretty well, I think. Questions that I had.
David, most of the infrastructure and the improvements, have they been nationally, or is it pay-as-you-go, or have people actually gone through the bonding process? What do you hear?
Well, as far as operational, pay-as-you-go, collecting user fees and that type of stuff, very few pull out monies to set aside. I wouldn't even hazard to guess how many, but For a lot of them, it comes down to going for bond issues. Now, some of the departments, especially if they're like a park district, but even some of the large park systems around the nation, they have different mechanisms than we do, but they may have a maintenance bond going on that rolls. So every 2 to 3 years, and they may have 2 of them, so they're always running. Those are done. Other ones can use revenue bonds, which would say that we're going to generate X amount of money on this community center, and by improving it, we can bring in that additional.
But as one matures, they run something else.
Sometimes, yeah. So,
Continuation.
and some are looking at increased taxation as their trigger for the revenue bonds. You're seeing a lot of that in Texas. Once again, that's not something we can do in Idaho, and I would not be comfortable doing it. I think what we need to have is a very workable solution. And mind you, we're just starting to hit some of that, but we're still talking 20 to 40 years out. But the time to talk about it's not then. Okay.
Yeah, do some of the improvements as you go.
Yep.
Yeah.
So as I bring this up online to the television audience, I apologize that you're unable to see this PowerPoint of some of our accomplishments and stuff. The system will be coming up or repaired as soon as possible, so we'll get that going. But you know, Park and Rec Commission, you can do the oohs and ahs and make it sound even better than it is. So I just wanted to kind of review some of our 2017 and 18 projects and activities. I can tell you it was a good year. It started out as a highlight of our construction projects because that's kind of exciting. It's the glitter and the bling of the program. But we realized that across the board, we had an amazing year. This was done on top of our basic and base jobs and services. We dealt with a lot of change, especially on the recreation side when you reorganize. But if you look at the last few years with the park side, we just had done that, and then it went into the recreation. We had the challenges and increased public demands mixed in. You know, that could be anything from some of the pickleball things to street tree issues, park encroachments, staffing levels, land acquisition. We had all those things playing in, and I have to say that the staff that we have is amazing. They took on so many additional projects besides doing their regular jobs. Some of the areas that we're going to want to kind of cover, I'm not going to go over this whole list, but you'll see them coming through. But you can see that's quite a few items that start out from just talking about park construction, both small and big projects. It kind of grew, took on a life of its own. Staff changing in the recreation side, and I shouldn't say just recreation because there is a urban forestry too, because we had gotten a new position the year before. But we had some staff leave. Josh left after 10 years. So we promoted Rachel Lane up from recreation coordinator to the recreation supervisor, and she's done a great job. We did hire 2 recreation coordinators because Rachel left her position and we had another position become vacant. So Sean Leary was hired as a recreation coordinator. Then we also hired Kendall May as a recreation specialist because that position came open. And then our latest on the recreation side was Wade Meyer, and he became our second recreation coordinator. So you're looking at a fairly large chunk or percentage change in the recreation side of it, and I can tell you that they've done a great job. And then Scott Top was hired as a full-time city arborist, and we were able to do some amazing things in that with him aboard. So one of the things that we were able to focus on with help of our Public Works Department with some of our ADA improvements. This is just a sample of it, but Park at the Meadows, fixing that pathway and getting the slopes right, cross slopes and widths and elevations all become a critical part. We had a lot of entryway areas, so you saw some stuff around the freeways. You've seen stuff around the city where the street department put in new wheelchair access points. Well, we also were able to do the same thing with Beck Park. That pathway around it functions as a sidewalk. And then connectivity to the pickleball courts off of Beckfield, but we've done stuff at White Pine Park, and we've done other parks. So some of them are very just short little pieces to connect and get at that access. Some of them are a little more in-depth and a little bigger than they look. That pathway, which is right in, see if I get this, right in here, that's actually a little more complicated, taking out the old, getting it leveled right, and then bringing it back in. So, and some of those things that were done to also take care of ADA, but also address some maintenance issues and make it easier for us and more efficient. Sportsman Park renovation. Anybody who's driven along Spokane Street has seen that go from a 40-plus-year-old facility that was pretty worn down to an updated facility. That wasn't in it, I mean, total renovation. But it wasn't just renovation. We'd address ADA issues and access in the parking lot and around it. We did expansion of the parking lots. We looked at the safety of the site. We looked at the traffic flow throughout it and around it, and we did upgrades. And that was a big project. It took longer than expected, but the end result was a fabulous facility. A lot of old buildings that were in there, the old, trying to think, the announcer's booth and scorekeepers and some of those were removed. We could not bring them up to ADA. They weren't used. And it cleaned up the site. It wasn't just the park though, but the whole roadway and the parking there along the church. Reworking slopes, opening it up, and even the restroom in there was upgraded. So, and then end result is a facility that can keep going for another 20, 30 years with proper maintenance.
Beautiful now.
Yeah, it is. It's gorgeous. I had mentioned earlier about rentals and that increased demand. It's not that the number of rentals increased that much. You know, for the trailhead, we went from the year before 47 to 52, but the number of hours rented, over 100-hour increase. People were renting not just for one day, but maybe 2 or 3. So that length of time. So even though we count a 3-day rental as one, instead of, because the same person. So those things. The park reservations went up from 203 to 215, but we also saw an increase in demand. So that's just a change in there. Our recreation classes went strong. 95+% of our classes all had positive increases in it. We saw department-wide revenue go up up over $200,000. Majority of that came from rentals, the cemetery, volleyball, and our day camp. As you can see, Camp Chameleon, it had a huge increase this year. That was one of the things we did revamp. Staff spent a lot of time trying to streamline it a little bit and make it more responsive to the public, the parents, and that ability to go online and get things taken care of. Our volleyball program, our preschool programs, the special events. Well, some of them may not have gone up much. They continued to go strong. Others went up significantly. So we just finished Shoes and Brews. So it was a fun event. People enjoy it. We've had the one-day craft fairs that have become popular. Some of our tournaments, the bridal fair, which has helped increase the rentals on that trailhead. Post Falls Festival. We had a record crowd this last year with the Post Falls Festival. Our triathlon continues to be popular. And one of the new events, we had several new events, but one of them that just, it was big, Easter egg hunt. So we're looking to expand that and increase it, but it's, I don't know, it's controlled chaos at best. So you try to take care of that, but that's just how Easter egg hunts are. It's a few minutes of pandemonium, but it's greatly appreciated. We had thousands. Cemetery expansion, that's been a 3+ year project. I think we're getting towards the end of it. We've had steady growth within the cemetery, so as you can see, we've, from dollar-wise, $174,000 in that 14-15 to $256,000 to this last year. Numbers have been kind of steadily increasing, the number of burials and stuff. I think we had quite a few this year. Doesn't mean that our lot sales always match with that because there's a lot of pre-sales, but if you go by the cemetery and you see that first section that's been hydroseeded and leveled, it looks gorgeous. And by next year, we'll have the niches somewhere in transit right now that's supposed to drop into place, and then we'll start cleaning up the next parts, but it's, we're on track, so that's a good thing. Gives you a little bit better view and how it surrounds the fountain. I told you that our staff continued to do their base jobs, whether it was on the recreation side, the cemetery side, or forestry or park maintenance. But a couple things in the park maintenance I wanted to highlight. We stepped up the level of snow removal and plowing, and we continue to work closer and closer with Public Works on it. We do some of the street plowing and support. We do facility clearing. We do a lot more of the sidewalk clearing, and the city in the budget last year allowed us to buy some new equipment to address some of that, and it made us much more efficient. So we were able to take care of that. We received a number of compliments from the public that had been critical about our ability to open up trails and walkways and stuff, and the way we were able to respond. So that was a really critical piece, and we thank the council for making that possible. Matter of fact, Public Works has been able to buy a couple more for the sidewalks, and we're continuing to upgrade that ability, or the equipment for snow removal. In there also is our playground inspections, and we do those, and Brian will correct me because I'm probably going to have this wrong, but I'm going to say monthly, but I think it's more than that even. Do you want to correct me now? So we can have it on record. I've been corrected.
High frequencies are monthly or every other week.
Okay.
Low frequencies are quarterly generally,
So,
depending on use and age of equipment and a number of other factors.
so for the television audience, it's monthly or every other week, depending on the frequency of the equipment and the use on it, age of the equipment. Some of the pieces that are smaller or isolated that don't have as many moving parts may go to a quarterly basis. But in addition to that, if we have any inquiry by the public or a concern or a complaint made, we have to go out and check it immediately. An example is we had a piece of equipment that a member of the public raised a concern about the speed on it. Staff did go out and check and determine that it was within the factory specifications, but it doesn't end there. We go back in and check with those reps and make sure that there has been no change in that status and that those are all correct. So, and then you get back to the staff. So it does have an impact, and it takes up more time than people would expect. Planting of the flowers, so that was something that took extra time, but it looked great. Even on the mowing. And I had to show the aerial photo of that Warren Playfield. from the ground, you don't see, it doesn't look quite as impressive, but once you see it up above and you see just how much pride they take in it, and that was actually taken by one of our mowing crew people, because they were proud of what they've done. They did other parks too, and just showing off what, so there's some pride in work there, so, you know, and that's seasonal staff that's running that, so. Urban forestry. They took on a wide range of projects along with the reviewing of plans and visibility, pruning, and everything else, but they had a large part to do to coordinate with our construction group on finishing up the trailhead for the community forest.
Did we ever finish the tree count?
It's always
We're counting trees.
We're always counting trees. I don't think we finished the count. But if you look down on this lower portion here, get down to that, yeah, I'll let it roll, right there. That was actually, they went in and we replaced some street trees. It had been a dispute between a developer and the HOA. It was taking up a lot of staff time, and at a certain point we felt that, you know something, the trees are dead. It was an eyesore, it was a lot of issues. We went in and replaced, I think it was 6, 7 trees. The nice thing is we had to form an agreement with that HOA that was taking over from the developer on the treatment, because it had been the maintenance of it that had killed the trees. But they came in and it just looks gorgeous. I mean, you look at night and day difference between that and the other trees. The other picture where you look at, looks like a logging operation right in here. It was a logging operation. That was Corbin Park. We had beetle infestation and we had to address it. And that took up a lot of our forestry staff time, along with all the pruning, everything else. So that's them doing some tree pruning with our bucket truck. So that's an urban forestry piece of equipment. There's a chipper behind it. They worked on the community trails, working on some of the signage in their trail building. That's a bridge that was being put over on a seasonal waterway. And just like the park maintenance side of clearing snow, these guys aren't stopping during the snow or during the winter either. That's injecting into the root zone during the winter. So I'm not sure if that was fertilization or pesticide application. So those are things that are always going on, and it's hard work. It's outdoor work, but they've done a great job. And of course, our tree giveaway can't get away from not mentioning how successful that project is. Encroachments took up a lot of time. Corbin Ditch, Black Bay, Kiwanis Park, Centennial Trail, some of them go fairly quickly that we can get in a couple months. Some of them takes several years. The Corbin Ditch was one of those. I mean, 4 or 5 years, and it took so much with survey work and negotiations and all that, but we did get that settled. Black Bay, you're well aware, we gave up half an acre and picked up 5.5 acres and gave access to the west side of the city. The Kiwanis Park with bringing in the fence line, and that was highly contested. The fence is in, and we actually received a couple compliments back on how well it looks. So it takes a lot of staff time, adds a few gray hairs, hopefully more to Brian's head than mine, but it does go that way. And then to the bling, park construction. You know, that's the fun part. We had some small park projects. This is the meadows. We had looked at eliminating the pickleball court and creating a basketball court with it, as we'd done that trade with Beck Park. It was not well received. And you know, sometimes as you're dealing with some of the stuff, you have to take a step back and say, you may not like the message, but sometimes you have to listen to it. And one of the things that was said in there by one of them is, you had a sand volleyball court that's not being used. And we recognize that. didn't have the money, but we recognized that that was probably true. That was one of those trends, and it's just, we don't see them used that much, and the maintenance is very high. So we said, okay, how can we make this work? So we went, and we looked and researched, and we worked with finance, and we were able to get some dollars to put in, to eliminate that sand volleyball court and put a basketball court that was slated for that park into that space. We were able to do some of our own construction internally with Public Works and with our own staff, and then we contracted out for the paving. So they will this next summer have a full basketball court next to the pickleball court. We have our first splash pad going in at Syringa Park, and that's a couple pictures in that of the construction. So by next summer, there will be that splash pad in operational, and we expect the Tullamore one to be operational too, and then we'll be working on a third one in the following year. So kind of exciting. Crown Point, that was one of the ones where we had a developer doing some of the work, and then we were to take over. We just finally received the park at the last council meeting. It's been a little bit of a challenge as a park and in that, but we will start construction work on it later this winter and next spring. Some of that stuff will be done with contractors. We, with our staff, won't step in really until we finish Tullamore. We have to get the Tullamore done. But Crown Point will have a playground up and running, and we'll go from there. So Tullamore, that's been a long project.
10 years?
At least, with the recession, going through the negotiations, developing that working relationship with the developer for that. And I think what you're going to see is a great park. It's probably the most comprehensive park that we've done to date. And the one thing that I hear again and again is when you go on site, it feels so much bigger than the 8.3 acres it is. And it's got a lot of features to it. But that was it in the rough stage. That's with the developer doing their work. They did the rough grading, they put in the pathway and some of the utilities and the parking lot, and we took it over. So restrooms are under construction, the picnic shelter, even more so. Landscaping is pretty close.
They're just about gone.
Just about gone. Hydro seeding, irrigation. More pictures. This winter, and I think it's starting in November. Yep, we'll start having the playground structures going up on that. You got the pickleball courts are in. You know, our staff built all the trusses in that, doing all the work. It's a gorgeous facility. It's coming together. We did have to go in and cut out some sections of the trail that did not meet ADA and replace that. We had some spots where we had to go under, so it doesn't work perfect. Every time we found that we were missing structural soils under a lot of our structures, so that had to be built up. So those are things you encounter. So, but next summer we're going to have 2 park dedications to plan out and celebrate. So that'll be happening. But that's a sample of our year.
Good job.
Open to any questions.
Yeah.
A lot of work.
Yep. Staff has done a great job.
Yep.
And to the television audience, those were wonderful slides in there. So
Good job, Dave.
it all goes to the staff.
Your staff, yeah, absolutely.
Done a fabulous job. And even to you guys. You guys have given us a lot of feedback, and we've talked about some of these things, and it doesn't happen in a vacuum, and different ideas. And like anything, are we getting everything in there we want? No. Even us, we have a budget, but we're working on grants and working on ways in technology to see if we can't stretch our dollars. So.
Glad to see the splash pad, too.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
What did you say, there's going to be 3? 3 total?
Ultimately, there will be 3. We'll have 2 to start, and then we'll work on the third third one. And the idea is to have these so they're interchangeable, so the top features that you see coming out can be taken off and moved to different parks. So it gives it a fresh feel every year.
Right.
Mix up, change.
Very good, very good.
Good idea. Thank you. Very well done. Any other questions or comments? Well, let's see here. We don't have any commission comments? Anybody have anything they want to touch on? Okay. We'll move on then to adjournment. We're closed.
Close.